Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Hello, fellow patriots, and welcome to Patriot Radio. Today, the drone drama continues. What's going to happen there, we don't know, or maybe we actually kind of do. Also, in the Middle East, Turkey, and the rise of the new caliphate. And our guest today, J.R. Nyquist, talking about China and Russia are ready for war, is the United States. If you have the opportunity, please follow us on Telegram for real-time intelligence analysis and breaking news. Because here at Patriot Radio, we want to bring you the most accurate information before everybody else so that you and your family can be prepared for the times that are ahead. In fact, the times that are already upon us. But no fear, we were made for this. And that brings us now to your encouraging word from the Word, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 10 through 12. For the one who desires life, to love and see good days, must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. He must turn away from evil and do good. He must face peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears attend to their prayer. The face of the Lord is against evildoers. In these days ahead, prior to the inauguration, I think this is something that we must keep in mind. Heading into Christmas, let's turn toward the Lord, because God has already judged the evildoers, and the evil is being exposed. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing. We have a ton to go through today, but first from the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
Suddenly, everybody's talking about nuclear power and how that's so good, and also natural gas, which really begs the question of whether or not hydrogen fuel cell technology will be a part of that. But Exxon is to build a large off-grid natural gas plants to exclusively sell electricity. Where? Probably to AI data centers. So it's so interesting when it becomes profitable, then suddenly energy independence becomes cool. And that brings us now to the China front. Kill chain clash. China and the U.S. battle for all domain supremacy. China targets U.S. naval sensors to cripple American kill chains as both powers race to dominate AI-driven multi-domain warfare. China is sharpening its electronic warfare blades against the U.S. Navy, targeting critical sensors and radars to disrupt America's high-tech battle networks in a race for this dominance. So in the South China Sea, after the publishing of the kill list we talked about last episode, China continues to prepare for war and to prepare its people for war. Not 5 years from now, but in the near term. Also, U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security says, quote, China has, in fact, hacked into our telecommunications providers, end quote. As we have mentioned, even Apple and Android have said stop using their regular text message programs and use encrypted messaging services like Signal. But there's better ones out there as well. As we mentioned, Wire, Sessions, and Simplex. Chinese military adds hundreds of missiles and 100 more nuclear warheads to its arsenal, according to a Pentagon report. Chinese People's Liberation Army is clearly moving toward extensive preparations for war and involving, well, all of its military. And part of the reason that they're doing this so fast, and part of the reason this is out, is because Pentagon analysts are saying that the goal is to influence U.S. military leaders' decision-making and demoralize troops and so divisions in American society. I think Americans are waking up to this and the realization that war with China right now is probably going to happen in the next 2 years. That brings us now to the Middle East front. HTS leader Jilani, or the Golani, states he has no plans to model Syria after Afghanistan. Whew! I'm relieved, or maybe not. He's emphasizing the distinct cultures and histories of the two nations and expresses strong support for Syria's ethnic and religious diversity, and advocates even for women's education, and suggests that decisions on alcohol should be left to the committee during the drafting of the Constitution. He even put on a suit, which has led several Arab leaders to call him Discount Zelensky. But what's really happening is that some of his jihadis are threatening to, of course, invade Jerusalem and Saudi Arabia to capture the Prophet's Mosque in Medina and the Kaaba in Mecca, because that's what jihadis do if they're part of the caliphate. Also, security for Greek Orthodox Christians in Syria is deteriorating. The Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of Hama was shot at and a nearby cemetery desecrated. This follows on from the Hagia Sophia Church being vandalized and 2 people murdered, one of which beheaded. By the way, in the Hudud, the criminal penalties for Islam, crucifixion and beheading are the penalties for preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Breaking, Turkey, and we need to understand this, Turkey is backing SNA rebel forces. They are about to carry out a significant military operation in northern Syria, and we can see the buildup in areas bordering Kobani. Quote, looks like an invasion is imminent, end quote. Now remember that U.S. troops are there patrolling with Kurdish forces. Not only have they been patrolling, but they've also taken over Russian military bases. Are we looking at NATO versus NATO? We're going to keep our eyes on this, but it does not look good there in northern Syria. And on the heels of that, from the Pentagon, oops, we've been briefing you that there are approximately 900 U.S. troops in Syria, but we made a mistake. There's actually 2,000. In other words, almost 3 battalions. This is a flashpoint that could go sideways very, very quickly. Maxar satellite images dated December 17th show an unusual buildup of vehicles at the Tartus Naval Base. And this video from the site shows that most of these vehicles are logistical, only a few appearing to be combat vehicles. And this is to say that these vehicles are likely being prepared for evacuation by naval vessels. And another open source intelligence site has now confirmed that Russian cargo flights from Syria to Libya may be arriving at Al Jufra Air Base in central Libya. And so the implication is that the Russians are now moving to make Libya their base of operations in the Middle East and North Africa. Recep Erdogan, the wannabe caliph, well, he's been talking quite a bit today and commenting on Syria. Turkey revealed that its country cannot define itself or confine itself to its current borders and vowed to continue military involvement in other countries. Could this be an open declaration that Turkey is the new caliphate? Also, the only Christian Assyrian deputy in Turkey, George Aslan, I find that interesting, attempted to convey a Christmas message in Parliament, but the deputy speaker of the Parliament turned off his microphone. And, well, turned it off when he started speaking Aramaic, the language of Jesus. In response, he said, quote, when verses from the Quran are recited here, Microphone is not turned off because they say it's a holy language. The language I just spoke is Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ. Holiness matters. This is a holy language too. Then the microphone should be turned off when the Quranic verses are cited, end quote. Persecution of Christians in Turkey. Erdogan continued with a statement, all arms sales to Israel must be banned and any international trade with the country should be halted. Clear sign, again, that Israel is being targeted by the wannabe caliph. Also, sums of money sent to U.S. universities by Qatar is, quote, absolutely mind-boggling. Here's a graph of that. Look at this. He's the biggest donor to U.S. universities. And we wonder why there are pro-jihadi protests in the United States. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about the Russia front and also some interesting developments right here in the United States.
Hey folks, it's your buddy John Rich here and co-founder of Old Glory Bank. Let me ask you a question. Why would you trust your banking with people that hate you? Well, you shouldn't. We're building a freedom economy and now we have a pro-America bank. It's called Old Glory Bank. Check it out at oldglorybank.com and open yourself an account today.
Old Glory Bank is a full-service, FDIC-insured online bank with business and consumer banking and customers in all 50 states. It takes just 8 minutes to open an account at oldglorybank.com.
The Donor Deck represents a groundbreaking independent crowdfunding initiative driven by patriots like you to bring back our esteemed President Donald J. Trump to office. With unwavering passion, we pledge all profits from the sale to MAGA Inc. and Fight Like a Flynn PAC. The exquisitely detailed challenge coin is a timeless collectible to be passed down to generations. It symbolizes your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. Get your Donor Deck now. Go to the Patriot.tv store and click on Donor Deck. Enjoy the magnificent artwork and scripture on each playing card, knowing our appreciation for your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. You'll get this keepsake collectible challenge coin acknowledging your support for Donald Trump's run back to the White House, and the Donor Deck of 52 exquisite playing cards, plus a beautiful display case to show your challenge coin. Go to the Patriot.tv store and get your Donor Deck now.
And we're back with the Russia front. Swedish police just boarded the Chinese vessel Yipeng 3. The saga continues. Its crew is suspected of having destroyed 2 undersea telecom cables linking Finland, Germany, and Sweden, Lithuania a couple weeks ago. It was intercepted by the Danish Navy while trying to leave the Baltic Sea. So it looks like something may actually end up happening out of that. Now, it had just left Russia, even though it's a Chinese vessel. Sweden's deputy PM and energy minister, Ebba Busch, criticizing Germany for shutting down all its nuclear power plants. It left Germany without baseload power needed in days without sunshine and wind. There it is, the statement of the obvious. Putin very likely resurrected a narrative to reiterate that the Kremlin views regime change in Kiev as a necessary precondition to negotiate, well, and a whole bunch more that very likely would stop negotiations before they even start. Trump certainly has his hands full coming up. Putin dared the United States to an experiment, gather all Ukrainian air defense in Kiev in one place to be hit with an Orezhnik hypersonic missile. Let's see if they can shoot it down. Putin's rhetoric getting very bold here in recent days. Also in Russia, 2 large explosions reported at a military facility near the Northern Fleet's main naval base in Murmansk. This is a significant development. We're going to keep our eyes on this. There's no more that has come out of this just prior to us coming onto the show. But that is dramatic if the Ukrainians have been able to reach fully Murmansk. And that brings us now to the South America front. Now, part of this is really Central America, South America, but this kind of growing alliance between Argentina, Paraguay, and El Salvador, linked by many things, but one of them is kind of this development of cryptocurrency. But El Salvador plans to sell or shut its crypto wallet here after it looks like Bitcoin is peaking. In addition to that, Mexican President Sheinbaum says she's prepared to welcome Mexicans if President-elect proceeds with deportations, according to Bloomberg. Well, how very nice of her. And that brings us now to the national front. On the national front, I'm going to add Canada, even though it's not the 51st state, at least not yet. Canada's embattled Trudeau to make major cabinet shuffle, according to sources. Yeah, he's been losing ministers left and right. And Pierre Poilievre has made a fantastic speech that really is uniting Canadians right now. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 72 hours. And I love what he said, that one man's personal drama should not determine the fate of a nation. It really should be focusing on the needs of its people. Also, in one of the most hilarious videos to date, Tom Homan faces off with CNN. Let's take a listen.
So how many days after Trump is sworn in before this effort to carry out the mass deportations begins? I know you said it starts on day one, but after how many days will we actually start to see that happening?
Day one. Day one will be ICE officers across the country will be out on the streets. Right out of the gate, President has made it clear, and I've made it clear, the priority right out of the gate is public safety threats and national security threats. And there's plenty of them to find.
Day one. And they mean it. You should have seen the body language for those listening on the radio. She was stunned that he meant what he said. I guess they're not used to that in Washington, D.C. Also, Elon Musk posting from Pete Hegseth. Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth's Senate confirmation hearing is scheduled for January 14th. It looks like he will, in fact, be confirmed. Also, the White House, at least White House aides, and there have been several undercover videos from James O'Keefe coming out on this. White House aides hid Biden's apparent mental decline from day one of his presidency. Explosive report reveals, according to the New York Post. There's going to be more coming out of that as they jump ship prior to Trump coming into office. California and Governor Newsom declaring a state of emergency over the bird flu. Are they trying to really do a pandemic now? While Newsom says that the order was simply a precaution after one person in Louisiana was hospitalized, here we go again. Oh, wow. More good news. Chinese agent pleads guilty to operating secret police station in New York City. Leaders of the Chinese police station have helped Beijing organize counter-protests against Falun Gong demonstrations and locate the regime's targets. The real question here is, why has this not happened earlier and across the entire United States? Why are we not disrupting and dismantling these networks of our foreign adversaries? Well, we're going to talk more about that with J.R. Nyquist here in a moment. Drone wars. The FAA threatens deadly force in new drone no-fly zones for 22 New Jersey locales for, quote, special security reasons, end quote. More disinformation on this. What is it? Are these U.S. drones, Chinese drones, Iranian drones, or somebody else? Again, we're going to get to the bottom of that here with J.R. Nyquist coming up soon. Tom Homan again. A 63-year-old Mexican woman has officially admitted in federal court to leading a major human trafficking operation near the U.S.-Mexico border. Interestingly, she never fully hid her association with the organization. Based out of Mexicali, which is across the border from Calexico, California, she managed to smuggle over 100 migrants into the U.S. over the years. January 20th can't come soon enough. From the Western Journal, I've got, quote, billions of dollars in my pocket, Texas official snaps up auctioned border wall materials. Give it to President Trump. Remember, we talked about how they were selling them at bargain basement prices. Well, the Biden regime did not get away with that. And just in time for Christmas, Amazon workers decide to walk off the job. I think I'm going to refrain from commenting there, but if you think some Christmas presents are coming on time, might want to make other plans. Also, this continuing resolution was defeated yesterday. In that continuing resolution, there were several things that the $174,000 per year salary pay raises for Congress, expanding health care benefits, called for an opening of a new NFL stadium in Washington, D.C., renewed the Global Engagement Center, which was established during the final years of Barack Obama's administration, which is known for its censorship. And there was more, but enough to kill it, at least until today. And that is actually breaking news. The U.S. House has just happened, rejected the Republican bill to avert a government shutdown. So it looks like the new bill, just like the old bill, was killed. Also, President Trump announces success in Washington with this new bill. Well, now I don't know what's going to happen. So the old bill is dead. The new bill is dead. Are we going to have a government shutdown? Well, the bottom line is it might not be a bad thing. And as many people have been calling out here recently, the whole thing behind government shutdowns is really kind of a farce. Government actually operates more efficiently when it is shut down. Yeah, I love that idea. Perhaps we need to take a long, hard look at the way that the government is operating right now, the Department of Government Efficiency, not just paring down the government dramatically, but is the government actually doing things it's constitutionally obligated to do? Because protecting our God-given unalienable rights of life, liberty, property, and the ability to defend the same, that was supposed to be. Punishing evil, promoting good, was supposed to be the purpose. And the federal government was supposed to be very limited in scope, according to the preamble to the Bill of Rights and the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, where all rights not specifically delegated to the federal government were left to the states and the people respectively. So why are we still having this conversation? Perhaps a government shutdown is what's needed to see what really matters: the defense of this country and securing our borders. And lastly, U.S. IV shortage continues. The IV fluid shortage in the United States, which came from the hurricane that took out a North Carolina facility that produces 60% of the nation's IV fluid, is still not back to pre-Hurricane Helene productions. And that's probably going to continue into the foreseeable future. And that is the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. And when we come back from the break, we have our guest, J.R. Nyquist. But before he comes on and before we get to the break, I just want to mention this quick thing. There needs to be, in America right now, a reevaluation of what we're putting our defense money to, and do we really understand decentralized civil defense as envisioned by our founding fathers, but also by John F. Kennedy in the early 1960s? Because decentralized civil defense, that is what is going to be one of the biggest bulwarks against our enemies. And now, a word from our sponsors.
Patriot TV fans, feel like there's nothing on the radio for like-minded, intelligent people like yourself? Well, great news. Now you can stream Patriot TV on TuneIn during your drive to or from work. Whether you're stuck in traffic or cruising down the highway, you can catch every conversation from your favorite show hosts right in your car. No more mindless jibber-jabber. Tune in 24/7 on the road, at the gym, or wherever you are. Download the free TuneIn app now on Apple, Android, or your computer and never miss a beat. Patriot TV, now on TuneIn.
Now we have it. Kingdom Crunch.
It's important to start breakfast off with a power-packed punch. You want a complete amino acid score, good protein. If you turn the label over and look at the back of the box, there is no added sugars in either one of these flavors, either peanut butter or acai bowl.
Peanut butter has 11 grams of high-quality protein. Acai bowl has 8. Peanut butter has 11 grams of carbohydrate, acai bowl 12, and both of them have good, solid fat content at 6 grams. Very filling, very healthy.
You will be fueling yourself with high-quality fuel, starting off the day right. You can even use Kingdom Crunch as a snack in the middle of the day if you just have a craving and you want to eat something that is good for you, it has a crunch, and doesn't have a lot of calories.
There you go. Diabetic friendly, keto friendly, paleo friendly, Kingdom Crunch, and
child friendly.
And our guest today is J.R. Nyquist, a national security expert, but somebody that has been on the cutting edge, a forerunner about the threats to the United States, and more importantly, what to do about them. J.R., it's great to have you back on Patriot Radio today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
So, a lot of rumors out there today. Let's start with the drones. Are they American drones? Are they Chinese drones? Are they Iranian drones with a mothership off the coast? I mean, we've heard it all, literally. Or are they searching for radioactive material that has been somehow lost? What's the truth behind this?
Well, the thing is that nobody's saying, and we don't know. But given what has happened and the way the federal government is acting, it looks like they must be ours. And they are probably performing some kind of defensive patrol mission. So the idea of a nuclear threat to the U.S., this could be a rumor to panic people. Certainly the U.S. government would not want to panic people with such an idea. Look, after 9/11, we had similar panics. We had the anthrax scare. And of course, there was the idea that al-Qaeda was going to smuggle nuclear weapons and hit 7 American cities. You had talk of Soviet-era nuclear weapons from Central Asia leaking into the Arab world, leaking into Iran. So we've been through this before. I wouldn't be too panicked about it, but anything can happen.
I mean, there's been some alarming statements. Medvedev saying that, it's a loose Ukrainian nuke on U.S. soil. And then obviously you and I have talked about Stan Lunev and the unaccounted for suitcase nukes inside the United States. I mean, how do we take all this? How do we process it?
Well, there was a strange thing at the beginning of the war that I should mention. The Russians very quickly, one of the first places the Russians wanted to go, that invaded with their troops, was Chernobyl. There's a lot of nuclear material there, housed there. And we do know from intelligence that they opened the containment in some manner at Chernobyl. Now, why they did that, I don't know. And I've talked to other people who are aware of this, who are like mystified. What were the Russians doing? Why was it important to get to Chernobyl? And the speculation at that time was, were they extracting material from there to make a dirty bomb and blame it on the Ukrainians? But that's wild speculation, trying to figure out something. And of course, now you have Medvedev, the former president of Russia and the deputy secretary of the Russian Defense Council, Security Council, saying that Ukraine is planning a false flag attack on the United States to blame Russia, to get us into a war with Russia. Well, again, that's a psychological mind game. That's playing ping pong with your brain. The Russians love to do that. The Ukrainians would not do such a thing, because that would be suicide to do something like that, because you're going to get caught, and so I think it's a way to give people the jitters. The Russians have been into this game, which is very funny, of raising alarms over and over again, threatening nuclear war, saying NATO has crossed our red line, 27 times now. I've lost track of the number of red lines they've said we've crossed. And of course we have, because, if we breathe, we're going to get nuked. If we send any aid to Ukraine, we're going to get nuked. Here they're invading this poor country. They're slaughtering these people. They've taken 20,000 children as hostages in Ukraine. They're bombing their cities. They're bombing their power, so they're going to freeze in the winter. And if we give any help to these people, we're going to be nuked. I mean, think about how Hitler-esque that is. I mean, that's talk about nuclear blackmail. But what that does psychologically to us, because we're such a comfortable society, is that we start hearing it over and over again. We think, the Russians are bluffing. It's just a joke. But we forget they are talking to their own people. And China's been doing this since April of 2020 when the pandemic was going full blast. The Chinese press was saying, we're getting ready for a war against America. I mean, this was the Chinese military press in early April. Yeah. War against America, war against Taiwan. And of course, the Russians have been saying this now, war against NATO. I mean, for Medvedev, this Russian general, Kirillov, was, blown up on the street. He was basically a guy who used chemical weapons on Ukrainians. And I think he was being investigated by the International Criminal Court. But the Ukrainians decided to punish him. If you are going to use weapons of mass destruction on our civilians, we're going to hit your general. And so Medvedev said, all right, now all NATO officials are fair game. Right. We can assassinate them. So, but what this does is it desensitizes us to the fact that they're actually psychologically conditioning their people and having civil defense drills and having everybody tighten their belt. I mean, things are getting tougher in Russia, and they're being told to tighten their belts. We are still in a butter economy, and we're not mobilizing. And this is what the General Secretary of NATO, Mr. Rutte, was talking about this past week, or maybe it was a little more than a week ago. He was saying, look, Europe has to mobilize. And he even said Trump was right to basically threaten us to get us to spend more. And we need to spend even more because we're not ready for Russia. And Russia's getting ready. And you maybe saw there was a report, they used an AI with open source intelligence to estimate the chances of a war between Russia and the West, and it gave it a 40 to 50% chance in the next 2 years. Yeah. So, you just look at this, but yet you talk to people, and there is some concern. But where's the really getting ready for war? Who's talking about serious, Well,
we're not even talking seriously about defending against drones. I mean, one of the things that's come out of this is there a serious anti-drone capability deployed on U.S. military bases just inside the United States? We had a U.S. congressman who said this was an Iranian drone incursion with a mothership off the coast. Very interesting. He was very adamant and very specific about that. Then we have some people that we both know, Gordon Chang, Frank Gaffney, seem very convinced that these are Chinese drones. So I understand the psychological warfare, but I think the underlying question for all of us is, do we actually have any anti-drone capability, and are we ready for that?
What I've heard is we have some anti-drone capability, but it may not be adequate. I mean, one of the problems is the mass manufacturing of drones by China. This is Mr. Wang of Luda Media, and I've had a number of interviews with him, and he's talked about 150,000 drones being in production now, and goodness knows how many of hundreds of thousands have been built. And they have a capability of making these drones, taking them apart, putting them in pieces, and shipping them to the U.S. to make them look like farm equipment or other kinds of industrial equipment, so that the people in the ports that are looking at what's being shipped into the U.S. don't see what they are. Then they're brought to locations in the United States where there's Chinese nationals who are employees of a Chinese company, maybe a warehouse, maybe a farm. They put them together, they have a little runway, and yeah, they could operate a drone force on American soil. I mean, you had Kyle Bass, who discovered that 10,000-foot runway under construction by a People's Liberation Army general in Texas, and he got the Texas legislature to shut it down. I mean, they were literally building this giant runway, the Chinese, in the United States and Texas. And if it wasn't for Kyle Bass, goodness knows it'd be there right now. So what else is going on?
Right. What else is going on right now? And you brought up that Russia and China are preparing their people for war in the near term. I know there's been a few Nordic countries that have already discussed this, but nary a word here in the United States of America. I mean, if war happened tomorrow, we are not only not on a war footing, we actually might be getting softer, as you mentioned before we came on. Explain what that means to the average American right now.
Well, I was in Toronto in September, and I met the former commander of NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command, and his deputy. And I heard talks by other Canadian officers belonging to NORAD. There was a Canadian admiral there who was very informative on military infrastructure construction. And what we've had, you notice we stopped having shop classes in the U.S., teaching people how to be welders, metal shop, wood shop, electric shop, all those different kinds of skills they used to teach students. All our work went overseas to Mexico, to China, the Philippines, India. We lost this manufacturing capability, and Canada did too. Same basic things happen in both countries. And so the problem they have is that to really ramp up our military production, to keep up with the Chinese ship production, for example, and the Russian arms production, and maybe the artillery production is a little easier, but still that's difficult for us, is that we have to build the infrastructure to keep up, to close the gap before we can actually build the weapons. So we have a capability to build some more weapons now, but not on the scale that Russia and China are now presently able to build. So, I mean, what I was told in the meeting was, in 4 years, China and Russia relative to us will be stronger. The gap is going to widen for the next 4 years. And it isn't until 2029 that we start building new nuclear warheads, and our nuclear arsenal is past its shelf life. And this was what the commander of STRATCOM, Admiral Richard, said in 2020, in February 2020, before Congress. He said, in 3 years, our nuclear arsenal is going to be past its shelf life, and we're not going to have a new warhead production until 29. So there's that. I mean, that's more than 4 years from today. So in 4 years, our nuclear arsenal is going to be older, more past its shelf life, no new replacement nukes. Our missiles are older. Our Minuteman IIIs are so creaky. There was a period there where every other test was a failure on a Minuteman III. That means half weren't working. We had a more successful test here recently, but we've got a really increasingly creaky military infrastructure because we didn't lay down the production that we needed in advance. And this is what we have to do. This is what Trump has to do.
And can he do it fast enough? I mean, our shipbuilding also, we haven't even brought that up either.
That's one of the hardest ones to bring up. I mean, China builds the equivalent of the French Navy every year in terms of naval forces. We can barely maintain our fleet as it is. And the other problem is recruitment. For some reason, and maybe it's the opioid crisis and the way young people are taught, but they don't have enough recruits in our military to man all the ships that we have. So they're mothballing ships because we don't have enough sailors. And so we're in a rather difficult position as a country. I think socially and in terms of infrastructure and the psychology of our country, there's been some failings.
Dramatic failings. And talking about the drones again quickly, there could be a drone Pearl Harbor. I mean, if these were all suicide drones, for example, if you had a swarm of suicide drones, that could attack a military base. It could attack Mar-a-Lago. I mean, are we prepared?
Well, the alarming thing is, drones have been something that you have a human pilot that's remotely piloting the drone. The Chinese have been developing these chips. They've smuggled high-end chips out of the U.S. They're using them to make drones that fly themselves. And you've seen the giant Chinese demonstrations where they have a giant cloud of drones. Imagine how terrifying 10,000 drones coming to you, blotting out the sky, wiping out everything in their path like a bunch of locusts. The Chinese literally are working towards that kind of attack capability. And we've got to get on the ball, because if they can smuggle those into Mexico, into Canada, into the U.S., they could do a lot of damage to North America.
When we come back from the break with J.R. Nyquist, jrnyquist.blog, we're going to be talking about peace between Ukraine and Russia. Is that even possible? And what should the United States be doing to prepare, especially regarding civil defense here in the near term?
Attention patriotic businesses. Do you want to see your sales skyrocket by selling your products or services to like-minded patriots? Well, if you're an advertiser who embodies the timeless principles of freedom, liberty, and patriotism, look no further than Patriot TV. Our viewers are responsive, economically active patriots who are committed to supporting businesses like yours that align with their values. For more information on advertising on America's new network of proud American businesses, email us at advertise@patriot.tv.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's filling up more energy, more get up and go. And it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
We're back with J.R. Nyquist, jrnyquist.blog, talking about the geopolitical implications here in the next 2 years. We're going to shift to Russia, Ukraine. Trump has been very adamant that he's going to bring peace there. There will be a peace deal. But is that feasible? And really, where are the Russians standing on all of this in reality?
Well, I thought really Russia needs, because of its economic problems and because of the casualties they're suffering, I thought, the Russians really need a break. And what was interesting is that Trump came out and wore a blue blazer with a yellow tie at one of his meetups. And of course, those are the Ukrainian colors.
Right.
And if I'm a Russian strategy analyst and I'm watching that, I'm thinking, oh man, no matter what this guy says, he's just signaled us that he's going to really support Ukraine. And of course, it's the mind game that Trump plays with his enemies and with his political opponents, and you just couldn't miss it. And so the Russians, I don't know if they're playing hard to get, but when Trump called over to the Kremlin and said, "How about we set something up?" The response came from Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman. He said, "Mr. Putin has explained our position in his speech before the Foreign Ministry in June." Go read that speech. Well, that speech says, we're going to annex these provinces and Ukraine has to demilitarize and denazify. I mean, it's very long, but that's basically what he says. And of course, denazification is just terminology for it turning into a Russian puppet state. Mm-hmm. Having Russia choose the leaders of the country and call everybody else Nazis and put them on trial and put them in a gulag. And of course, that's not a negotiating position anyone can start off with. You don't enter a negotiation when somebody's giving you a ultimatum like that. You wait until they have a more reasonable position. And of course, it's funny the Russians have this adamant position. They've had it from the beginning. There's been a lot of blaming the Ukrainians, but look, Ukraine is fighting for its sovereignty. They're not going to enter a negotiation to compromise it. And I think Trump understands that. Trump has picked, General Kellogg is very interesting as Trump's envoy to these proposed negotiations. He admonished an interviewer at A Voice of America last April. The second question in the interview was about how Biden had strengthened Ukraine, and he just tore into the guy, basically, the poor guy. No, we haven't. Biden didn't strengthen them. 31 tanks is not strengthening them. A handful of artillery pieces doesn't strengthen them. That's nonsense. And thank goodness for him, because this is a general who really knows the scale here of this war and knows the scale of our help. And it's really a pittance. Basically, Biden has given lip service and is not. I got a feeling Trump is going to put the pressure on Russia because he wants the best deal for the West, for us. He's already got the General Secretary of NATO basically complimenting him. So,
right. I mean, who would have guessed that would have happened right out of the gate? But I see this with Ukraine, and there's a lot of folks in the conservative circles that are just trying to say Russia's our friend, Putin's our friend, Putin's the protector of Christendom and Christianity. I mean, clearly from his own statements, those things are not true. So how does that faction play into this? And I agree with you. Trump is going to put pressure on Russia because he's already doing it with China. How does that play into this? And then on the flip side, could that faction end up sabotaging any essential peace deal that might be possible if Putin suddenly decides to backtrack massively?
Yeah, that's an excellent question because it's something I've been looking into for years. There's a guy named Alexander Dugin. He's advanced a narrative, an ideology called Eurasianism. And he's been working on it for more than 30 years. He's been training people around the world. He wants to destroy America. If you read his biography, you'll see that he was recruited by the KGB in the 1980s. He was part of this circle of people interested in Aleister Crowley in Russia and occultism, and he uses the occult and perennialism. That is, all religions are really talking in different ways about the same spiritual reality, and the real enemy of all religion is American materialism. And so America is really the enemy of all traditionalists, all religions, Christians. He has a little harder time selling it to Christians, but his agents are invading Catholic parishes all throughout Europe and South America. They're using the Orthodox Church as a kind of invasion spearhead, and ecumenism as a spearhead. They're using they've infiltrated Judaism, they've infiltrated Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam. They're using particularly certain naive Sufi clerics. So it's a global movement to move traditionalists, conservatives, seriously religious people of all religions to being anti-American. Chinese are doing the same thing with the local religion in Taiwan. They're saying the Americans are never going to support Taiwan because they're Christians and you're pagan and they hate you. And this is how China is undermining the traditionalist Taiwanese conservative support for, being on the same side with America and holding out against communism. It's fascinating to watch, and they have so many agents, and brilliant agents, by the way, who are scholars in religion, who are using infiltration tactics, just like China is infiltrating Canada, United States, and Mexico, and all of Latin America to set up an attack on us. They've been infiltrating Russia, and Dugin's secret army has been infiltrating all the religions. It's like the Soviet Union was doing that to some extent in past decades, but this is like massively souped up. It's incredible what they're doing, and they're using blackmail. They're using bribery. They're using every dirty trick in the book that is used in espionage, infiltration, subversion. And, I talked to a Romanian scholar the week before. You've probably seen about Georgescu in Romania, this guy that's really pro-Russian, getting into the second round of the presidential election and them having to call it over because all this Russian money and Chinese technical help went into getting this guy up there. I mean, they're literally infiltrating everywhere. And what she said is they've got these local parishes. She says, I don't know how they do it. They've got these local parishes in Romania, Croatia, and Italy to be on the side of this Duginism, to be on Russia's side. So they're doing it in America too. And they've duped people. This thing is because we're a lot of conservatives are demoralized because of the way the left and wokeism has gotten into our schools and universities and even into some of the churches and into society. And we're thinking our society is our enemy now. No, it's just infiltrators. Don't blame America for this. Don't say this is American. This is something else. We have to fight within ourselves, but it's not to join up with Russia to fight it. And it's so diabolical what they're doing. It's crazy.
It is. And it's not just infiltration in the churches, but also massive infiltration of political parties. I'd like you to comment on that.
Yes. Well, they always had, they've always wanted to infiltrate the right, and they've tried different experiments because what they want to do is they never just infiltrate to take secrets or to win over agents. That's part of it. But they want to shift our thinking, shift our ideology, shift our frame of reference so that we can accept communist ideas into conservatism, right? I mean, that's mind-blowing, but you watch what they've done, how they've evolved it in certain places, and you look at some attempts to change the way we think, and you go, where's that coming from on the right? How's it? There's MAGA communism now. There's these MAGA communists, you know, and I've written a little bit about it, but it's for real. You know, go Google it and look it up. This attempt is serious, and I noticed this like a decade ago. I started seeing these moves on the right with these kind of edgy. There's anti-Semitism mixed into it, which the Russians love to use that. There's maybe a little bit of secret, you know, maybe Hitler was right kind of stuff in it. And of course, the Nazi diaspora ended up under control of the Soviets at the end of World War II. There's a lot of testimony that the Nazis who fled to Argentina were led by agents like Martin Bormann, who was really a Soviet agent. Same thing with Heinrich Müller, the head of the Gestapo. It turns out he was a double agent working for the Russians. So there's this complicated history, and they're using all of this to try to remake the right. So that you could say it this way, what Mr. Wang of Luda Media has said, and I've noted this on my own, China's taken over and is pushing the traditional left, all the communist front groups and stuff. They're pushing with that, where Russia's stepped back from that, although Russia still has a hand in some of it. But the Russians have gone to the right end of the street and are really pushing hard on the right to you know, we used to say that on the left we had the useful idiots. Now we got useful idiots on the left and the right. And what we need is people on the left and the right to both wise up, say, hey, wait a minute, we're all Americans. These are our enemies over here, and they're infiltrating us.
So one of the real conversations that I think the Trump administration needs to have is, in the Centers for Security Policy has brought this up, Kyle Shadler has brought this up, that civil defense, a return to decentralized civil defense inside the United States of America, really is a solution to many of these things. John F. Kennedy understood this as one of the big checks against any sort of invasion or any sort of mass attack inside the United States of America from infiltrated special forces, from foreign adversaries, etc. Do we actually have a shot at decentralizing civil defense? And what are your thoughts on how that might look like?
Well, I mean, I have a friend, Barrett Moore, who created a company years ago that Sovereign Deed, and he tried to create a civil defense, you know, to make civil defense affordable by getting first billionaires to buy into it. That would be the basic infrastructure input. Then it would be cheaper, and then, you know, upper middle class people, then middle class people. And he was hoping that this would be an industry, but he got so attacked by people. And part of the reason why this has never happened is because of the stock market and because of economic optimism. If you believe there is a serious threat to the country in the way we're talking about, the market's going to go down. The market's not going to be, oh, there's a peace dividend, everything's wonderful, it's all coming up roses. When people are scared, the market doesn't really, if people are investing in bomb shelters and those things instead of, you know, more consumer stuff, it hurts certain vested interests. So I think that's one of the reasons why it hasn't happened. I'm hoping we have to have a change of consciousness where we realize how vulnerable we are. I mean, the biggest problem is you and I, decentralized civil defense, in the kind of weapons we're talking about, we can save food and water and dig a hole in our backyard and survive certain things. But the real complicated part is the long-term survival recovery in one of these longer wars. Look at what they're doing with conventional weapons to Ukraine.
Right.
Imagine if that was nukes. The power infrastructure is minimal. So you have to live with that. Food distribution. What happens? How many people are starving? So you have to set up things as it either has to be very large corporations or the government or them in league with each other to coordinate it, to make sure that people are taken care of in an emergency. And John Kennedy went into office, yes, he did, to pass a civil defense bill. It passed one house of Congress. He didn't get it through both. Then the Vietnam War happened and all that money got used up. in the Vietnam War. So we never did develop actual civil defense. We had this mutual assured destruction thing, and then we said, look, it's too expensive. We don't want to do it. But I think we've got to do something.
We do have to do something, and I think that the decentralization, at least the conversation could be had among emergency preparedness committees and communities at the local level and the county level. I've heard people start talking about this, and I think it's a conversation we need to have in earnest, especially if we're looking at a 2-year window like you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, what the NORAD general said is in the next 4 years, things are going to get worse, not better. And when Mr. Rutte said we need to do something now, and you have some people in Europe saying we've got to lower the welfare state, we've got to peel back the welfare state because we need the money to build weapons. And I think that's the right answer, because what Mr. Rutte said, if you care about your children and your grandchildren, you got to do this because it's for them.
J.R. Nyquist, thank you for joining me on Patriot Radio today. Always a fascinating conversation. Blessings to you, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
jrnyquist.blog. If you've not read his latest article, he actually puts an excerpt in there of Putin's speech back on June 14th, 2024, in where he was laying out what this should look like as far as peace talks are concerned. One of the prayer points here, and what you can do here locally in your community, bring up the idea, bring up the topic of decentralized civil defense. The restoration of National Guard armories, for example, can be done at the state and at the local level. These are things that you can have conversations about. And just like we talked about on Patriot Radio a couple of episodes ago, there is a push right now in Israel for there to be a brigade of 38 to 58-year-old veterans that form the backbone of a volunteer backup force in the event of another October 7th style attack on Israel. Well, why not for the United States? And I know there are many veterans out there, even listening to this show right now, that'd be more than willing to step up at that time. This is Matt Shea. Thank you for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. Merry Christmas, and keep up the fight.